thanks for coming this afternoon, and welcome to everybody to our presentation on the economics of scholarly publishing. And before JQ introduces our speaker, I just wanted to say a couple of things. First of all, this is perfect timing for the University of Oregon because I know all of you in the room are aware of the situation that we find ourselves in right now on campus. We're about ready to cancel approximately $1 million worth of journal literature. And this is we've done this before, but this is definitely the largest cancellation project that we've ever had to do on this campus. And it's severe in terms of its scope and its impact, I think, on both research and teaching. And so a lot of faculty will come to me and say, this is terrible about the cuts to the library's budget. But we have had no cuts to the library's budget. So none of this as a result of that. It's all a result of costs increasing way beyond what our allocations have been. Inflation rate on scholarly material runs anywhere between 7 and 10% a year. So it's probably second only to the cost of healthcare. So this is a situation that has really plagued the research library community now for at least 2 decades. And so what are we going to do about this besides cancellation projects and a lot of hand-wringing? One of the things that we are about to embark on now is an experiment or a project, a pilot project. We're going to allocate $50,000 from a recent allocation from the provost to help faculty who are interested in publishing an open access journal to help lower the barriers that might exist for them. So often there are page charges or author charges, fees associated with publishing in peer review open access journals. And if you are in fact interested in doing that, we want to help you achieve that goal. We don't have all the guidelines totally worked out yet, but we're very close to having something, a mechanism available for you to apply for some of this money. And if you have questions about how to go about doing that, or you have a journal that's ready to go, you can speak to JQ or myself about it. So I'm going to turn it over to JQ, who's going to introduce our speaker for this afternoon.
Thanks.
And I'm going to try to present this quite quickly because I'm sure that you want to hear Carl Bergstrom rather than me. Carl is a biologist at the University of Washington, associate professor there, who has a very wide range of interests and scholarship. Not only is he a well-known researcher in various aspects of hardcore biology like evolution and the risk in information and evolution. He is also well known as a scholar in broader areas of the flow of information in biological and social systems. And in particular, in the last few years, has become well known in the library community for his work either alone or with other members of his research lab or with his father, who is an economist, on the structure and economics of scientific publishing. And that's what Carl will be talking to us about today. But as you will hear, he draws heavily upon his research and his expertise in formal models and in an understanding of the way information flows. Recently, Carl's interest in the structure and economics of scholarly publishing has been focused on a variety of areas. He is well known, again, in the library community for the development of a metric for measuring journals called the Eigenfactor, which to a first approximation you can think of as a competitor for the ISI impact factor, which we all know is a disastrously bad measure of almost anything. He's looking not only at bibliometrics, but at various other tools for ranking journals, and in general at mapping the structure of science. So I'm not sure he'll talk much about that, but I'm sure that he will talk to you a lot about scholarly publishing and the structure and economics of that discipline. I'm going to turn it over to Carl.
Great.
So welcome, Carl.
Thank you very much. Let's see. Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure and also an honor to be here and be able to talk to you about these things. Yeah, so that was perfect introduction. It sounds like a wonderful program, by the way, with the open access fees. I hope you'll be accepting applications from the UW. Because it sounds, I'd love to take advantage of something like that. What I want to talk to you about are sort of three things today. I would talk about journal pricing, a little bit about journal ranking that I've been playing with the Eigenfactor and so things like that, and then actually mapping the structure of scholarship and a little bit about why I think that's kind of interesting as well. But sort of in keeping with the theme of importance of or their interest in open access, let me start by talking a little bit about journal pricing and why open access publication may, in some ways, help us deal with the kind of the price increases that are causing this cereals crisis. So, as many of you, but perhaps not all of you know, there's an enormous difference between the average cost of journals that are sold to libraries by for-profit publishers and those that are sold by nonprofit publishers, societies, university presses. It's about a four-fold cost across fields. These are some numbers from a study that Ted Bergstrom and I did prior to the electronic transition, so around 2000, and just showing the average cost per page in 6 different fields. Some of these are from other studies. Ted and I did these studies. These are summary of other studies. And in general, you see that tenfold. You see that fourfold difference. You then get this enormous shakeup of the way that papers are actually delivered in terms of going through the electronic transition. You get a big shakeup in the way that journals are priced as well. You go from individual subscriptions to paper to bundles of for large bundle collections for different publishers. And yet you see almost exactly the same pattern holds right across the transition. These are data from after the transition in 2005. The average price per page, we're still looking at 4 or 5-fold difference there between the average price per page. Some people say, well, but you're not taking page charges into account. You can take page charges into account, and it makes it a little bit less of a good deal. It costs 36 cents per page on average once you take page charges into account on per page per subscriber for nonprofit journals. But you still have this enormous gap remaining. And some people say, well, maybe there's difference in quality. There's no difference in quality. You can look at or at least as measured by citation information, the average price per citation is, again, 4 to 5-fold higher for for-profit journals than nonprofit journals. You see a very curious market here where you've got these radical differences in prices. And one thing that's been interesting to me as someone that likes to dabble in economics but doesn't really know so much about it is that why do we see these enormous differences in prices? It's because in 2009, being a publisher is a lot more like being a web developer than it is like being a railway baron. And by this I mean there aren't these enormous infrastructure barriers to entry or something like this that would allow people to set up a monopoly pricing structure. I mean, why would you have a 4 or 5-fold difference in average cost for competing products in the same market? This screams monopoly pricing structure. But I don't need to own 50,000 miles of railway tracks to get into business in scholarly publishing. I need a reasonable service provider and a copy of Front Page or whatever it is that you write web pages in the 21st century. So why monopoly pricing? Why do we see this particular price structure? And in particular, in the absence of these infrastructure barriers to entry, why don't we see a flood of cheap journals entering the market? I mean, obviously, the American Naturalist is doing a great job of making an awesome journal at 29 cents a page. Elsevier is obviously able to sell a comparable or inferior product for 5 times that. I'd be happy to do it for twice that. And why haven't I done so, right? Other than being a good guy. But no, I mean, I'm not. And so just a little thought experiment to think about what's going on here. I think it's sort of, there's sort of a structural reason why this is. So imagine, and it's sort of a coordination game that's going on between different authors in terms of what they read and where they publish. So imagine we got Amanda and Bob and Carol, and they're trying to decide where to publish, and they traditionally publish in the for-profit journal Ecology Diatribes, and Ecology Diatribes, benefits from this. It's the thing to read, and also, I don't want to pick on anybody, but Elsevier owns it, or Wiley owns it, or Taylor and Francis owns it, or any of the usual suspects own it, and they keep raising the price 10% a year, and it's getting very, very expensive, and libraries are starting to talk about canceling it, and Carol's feeling kind of upset about that, and a new startup enters, Ecology Polemics, and Ecology Polemics is run by a society and is very, very cheap, and Carol thinks of switching to Ecology Polemics, but the problem is she can't switch by herself, because Amanda and Bob are still publishing in Ecology Diatribes, and libraries are already stretched thin on their budgets. They can't afford to add Ecology Polemics. They're already struggling to keep this. And so there's a coordination problem, right? Unless Amanda and Bob and Carol can all find a way to simultaneously switch to this new entrant isn't viable, right? So what happens is, this journal becomes the coordination equilibrium for where scientists are going to send their stuff and where they're going to read. I want to publish where you're reading. You want to read where the best people are publishing. And once the publisher is sitting on that coordination equilibrium, they can charge and extract enormous rents from doing so. And so without some kind of mechanism to make these sort of individuals coordinate and make that shift together, we're going to have a really hard time getting away from this market, and you're going to be able to have the publishers charging really large rents there. Now, I claim open access is going to help a lot, and I'll show you why. It's not because open access means that the journals are free to people to read, but because they fundamentally change the structure of the market in a way that's important here. And the story works kind of like this. Basically comes down to the difference between substitutes and complements. And so, again, I think probably a lot of people are very familiar with this, but imagine that I just, on all the money I made from starting my new journal, I got to buy a great big house, and I want a big flat screen TV in every room, and so I need 6 TVs. And so now I can buy Sony or I can buy Hitachi. And so I go and I look at the prices, and these are substitutes. I don't actually care, whether I've got a Sony or a Hitachi on the wall. If Sony's got a better deal, I'm going to buy 6 Sonys. If Hitachi's got a better deal, I'm going to buy 6 Hitachis. And so we've got a nice competitive market between Sony and Hitachi to make good big screen TVs and sell them at good prices. Now I got all these TVs in my house, and there's nothing on, and so I get cable, and there's still nothing on, and so I decide I'm going to have to pay for some of those channels, and so now I can pay for HBO or Showtime, and now these are complements because you can imagine HBO would probably be happy to sell me 2 subscriptions to HBO. Suppose HBO is a little bit cheaper, and they sell me 2 subscriptions, but the second one isn't worth anything, right? What I really want is 1 HBO and 1 Showtime. So this competition between HBO and Showtime is really quite different than the competition between Sony and Hitachi, right? The second unit is useless in this case of complements. And so actually, for now I've got 6 big screen TVs. I mean, suppose HBO is a really bad deal compared to Showtime, or vice versa. I don't know which way it goes. I still would quite likely get it, right? I pay even if HBO costs twice as much, I still go ahead and get it. I can't buy a second unit of Showtime. That doesn't do me any good. And so we get kind of into this place in scholarly publishing. You can sort of see the analogy already. We've got nature and we've got science, and it doesn't do the library any good to have 2 copies of nature if it's a better deal. I mean, it's some good, but it's you need nature and you need science. You can't have they're complements. You can't have just buy repeated units of whichever one gives you the best deal. Okay, so that's that's kind of that distinction. Sorry if I went on too long about that for people who are very familiar with that. Now let's look at the structure of the way that resources and funds flow in economic systems or in markets. So if we take a typical market for typical production for something like cars, U.S. Steel sends steel to Ford. Ford turns it into cars, and those cars go to people, and then people send money to Ford, and Ford sends money to U.S. Steel. And so we've got resources flowing in this direction and money flowing in that direction, which is the way things typically work. Now we can look at what happens in academic publishing. In academic publishing, it starts out quite similarly. I'll retire to my study and write a manuscript, and I'll send it to Elsevier, and Elsevier will, I guess, get a stapler and put it together with some other things, and then they'll sell that staple to the University of Oregon for I don't know how much. Okay, so that's all fairly conventional, and as usual, University of Oregon sends a lot of money to Elsevier, and what's different about this, of course, is that I also send a lot of money to Elsevier. It is in the form of page charges. People from humanities are looking at me like I'm crazy now, but in the sciences, it's all vanity press, right? I mean, not in all of the for-profits, but almost all of the nonprofits, you actually pay some page charges, at least for your color figures, and maybe for every page, and so on. The point is not that there's anything fundamentally wrong or unethical about this business model. It's just a fact about the way this model works. There's actually a demand from these guys to have their stuff appear here, and there's a demand here to have the stuff that these guys are demanding to appear there, and so it's possible for the funds to flow in, toward Elsevier. It's a good place to be, for sure. What's more important about that is that then there's, of course, two natural models for how we might actually go about selling these things. I mean, typically we see the conventional model is this reader pays model. Is that I'll provide my labor for free to Elsevier. Elsevier will then sell the bundled product to the University of Oregon, and that's our standard reader pays model. The author pays model, of course, Elsevier, or more likely PLOS or something like that, is going to provide the bundled, or provide the typeset version of my labor for free to the University of Oregon, and I'm going to pay them to do it out of my grants or whatever the case may be. And so this is a typical open access model, right? It doesn't make the costs go away. It's just that the author pays it. Why is that important? The reason it's important is because under a reader pays model, you have Elsevier owns a set of complements. They own a set of journals. Each, the library needs one of each, right? So Elsevier's got, the Journal of Theoretical Biology, and then maybe there's a nonprofit competitor to that. And suppose the nonprofit competitor is 5 times cheaper and twice as good. Still doesn't do it. I mean, the university can't go and buy 2 copies of the nonprofit competitor and dispense with JTB. They need JTB. They're complements. They need one of each. Not so for authors. For authors, we're looking at substitutes. Suppose I've written 2 papers. Now I'm trying to figure out where to publish them. I don't care whether I get 2 papers in JTB, 2 papers in the nonprofit competitor, or 1 in each. It doesn't matter to me. They're complements. And so or they're substitutes in this case. And so basically what happens is under this complements model, the publisher, if effectively you're dealing with a large number of monopolists, right? When you're trying to purchase goods that are complements. In this case, where I'm trying, in this case, these different publishers essentially have to bid for my business, right? And so you've got competition. You've got a much more competitive market, and so we expect, instead of this monopoly pricing structure that's generating huge profits for Elsevier's stakeholders, we'd have a structure where you'd expect the pricing to basically go to average cost levels in a reasonably competitive market, and So, irrespective of the ethical arguments about information wants to be free or any of this other sort of business, there's sort of, which I'm somewhat sympathetic, but I mean, someone's got to pay for the infrastructure, right? But the point is that the structure of that market is one that's, I think, very much in our interest if we would like to see the monopoly profits of these sort of dry up, and we'd rather have that money stay in our institutions. So that's kind of one thing. Just one other note, so I mean that's sort of a systemic level. It doesn't say why the University of Oregon should necessarily prefer one or the other. It just says what are the consequences of this model or this model. I just want to point out, one thing that's kind of obvious to some people probably, but just for individual authors that are trying to decide where to send their papers, and there's a very strong individual level incentive with respect to where you send your papers. Think about what it is that you're trying to maximize and what it is that Elsevier is trying to maximize. When I send a paper to Elsevier, it's not like I'm Stephen King. It's not like I'm getting $10 a book. It's I just want people to read it. What does Elsevier want to maximize? Elsevier wants to maximize profits, and so we can draw a demand curve, which basically says, if the economists do this backwards, this. So the economists put the price as the dependent variable where it should really be there, but I've deferred to them. So if you want to sell this many units, this is the price you sell. So this is just a straight demand curve, and so what is Elsevier trying to maximize? Elsevier is trying to maximize the volume of this rectangle underneath the demand curve. I'm assuming that their marginal cost of production is zero, which it effectively is with online access. What is a for-profit? So that's what a for-profit is doing. A nonprofit is much more in line with what I'm trying to do. They want to maximize effectively, and they want to skim a little bit of money off to send their editors to meetings and things. But for the most part, they want to maximize their readership, subject to recovering their costs. They've got to set their prices high enough that they can recover their costs. So, a nonprofit's going to set their prices lower, and they're going to, sell a larger quantity. My paper is going to reach more people. So already, I was startled when we started collecting some data. I won't talk about them today, but when I started collecting data on the differences in the number of subscriptions to these cheaper nonprofit journals relative to these more expensive for-profit journals, vastly more people will see papers that are published in these cheaper journals. So that already moves in the right direction. Now you can sort of imagine what happens in the open access case. In the open access case, I now basically by paying for paying to recover costs myself, I relax this pricing constraint on the publisher, and now the publisher can set the price to zero, and I can enjoy the full demand. Everybody who wants to see the paper will get to see the paper. And so if I look at of these various models, for-profit, non-profit, open access, which ones are most closely aligned with my own interests? If there's a sufficient number of people that would like to see the paper that won't get to under the non-profit model, then open access is a great thing to do. If on the other hand, basically the idea is that I could be here, I could pay a sufficient open access fee like you're talking about helping people with, and I could push this quantity out even further. And for me, it depends. How big is the fee? How many more people are going to read it? I mean, maybe it's worth $500 and not worth $5,000, and those kind of decisions have to be made. But the point is that, with my incentive being just to increase the quantity, we typically move in the direction that I, as a scholar, want as I move down this spectrum. So, kind of individual incentives for at least going nonprofit and considering open access, depending on the prices. Okay, so that's a little bit about economics. I'm going to try to do a bunch of things, and we'll race through these, and then we can see how that goes. So I just want to talk about the whole issue of ranking journals that is on everybody's mind these days. And the story starts in 1927. A couple of chemists at Pomona College are facing the same problem that we're facing right now, and so they're trying to figure out what journals should we buy. And they make a proposal that they publish in Science, that they use a particular quantitative metric, namely let's count up the citations. We should hold in our library the journals that are cited. This is a science paper in 1927, and it was kind of a radical idea at the time. I don't think they had any idea what the sort of trouble they were going to cause by proposing this. So 1955 comes along. Eugene Garfield sort of formalizes this a little bit with his idea of the impact factor. Garfield founds Thomson Scientific that releases the impact factors. And the impact factor is basically, you can think of it as the number of cites in a 2-year period that a journal receives divided by the number of articles that it publishes. So it's the cites per article. How many times is this cited per article? And that's Garfield's measure of prestige. And then 2008 comes along, and here's impact factor, which Garfield had originally proposed as a way to try to figure out what journals should he include in his brand new citation index that's become the Web of Science. In 2008, his use of impact factor is expanding, as we know, and so it's now driving our hiring decisions. It's, of course, driving library subscriptions. It's very important in promotion and tenure. It determines ad placement, which is very important in the top and at the medical things. It's determining the research funding in Europe that's used in setting university rankings, of course. And as a result, what scientists obsess, and editors scheme, and publishers negotiate, and journals pander, and librarians fret, and administrators do what administrators always do, and everyone suffers. So we're really losing out here. I mean, impact factor was, when Garfield invented it, he didn't invent it to start Thomson Scientific and make everyone's lives miserable. It was supposed to serve scholarship, but instead, scholars have ended up serving impact factor. And so, what do we do? Where are we now? Is there some better way that we can evaluate the scholarly literature? And so I'm here to tell you that I've found it. Last time I gave this, someone pointed out, who has time for that? The point is, of course, in all seriousness, if you're going to evaluate a small collection of literature, how important is this paper? How, what should I think of this individual scholar? There's absolutely no substitute for reading the papers, or better, and understanding them, or if you can't do that yourself, read the papers and talk to someone who's read them and understands them. There's nothing I can do with Eigenfactor or anything else is going to get you off of that hook. You got to read the work, you got to understand it. And we can go on and on about misuse of impact factors and things to assess individual scholars. What there is, however, is there is a legitimate need in library decision making and in other aspects of the scientific process for quantitative measures of journal influence, prestige, and so on. So we might want to ask a question there are questions that we can't just read everything. What's the value? What should the dollar value be of a full volume of science? There's no one in this university or in this country who can properly assess everything published in science in a year. Nobody knows all of those fields well enough to actually do that, even if someone could find time to read it. Or maybe you just want to know about interdisciplinary work. How often do biologists cite economics papers? Again, I mean, you could start reading a lot in both disciplines, but that's a question. It's a aggregate level question with a legitimate need for quantitative measures. Which publishers' bundles provide the best value? Again, when you're trying to decide whether or not to buy the big deal from Elsevier, you're not going to go in and read everything in the big deal and then say, oh yeah, that was pretty good. You can't do that. It's too big of a volume, and you need to be able to assess these kinds of questions. So there's a legitimate need for quantitative measures. What we've done is developed something called Eigenfactor that was our own effort to do this. Basically, I was quite involved in writing papers about the economics of scholarly publishing. I was using citation counts and impact factors as my metrics. My reviewers would come after me with kind of a knife and say, you can't do this, this is stupid, impact factor is terrible, and I'd try to defend myself, but I sympathized with them. It was terrible. It was the wrong thing to be using. I said, well, what is it that you would actually want to use? And so this is a measure we developed for our own use that people have been pretty interested in. what it is it's based on a notion that's called eigenvector centrality. Eigenvector centrality comes out of sociology. The idea is to try to understand in a network, for example, in a social network, who's important in this social network. And so Bonasich proposed that the important people in social networks are those who have important friends. And so this is the sort of thing that makes scientists laugh at sociologists, but it's not circular. It sounds circular, but it's actually not. It's very well formed. Turns out that you can actually, you can recursively, or you don't even have to do it recursively, make this calculation. This is a well-defined mathematical question. Giving people importance scores such that people's importances are determined by the importances of their friends, and turns out to have unique solutions and so forth. We could go into the mathematics, but rather just, the perhaps most stunning world-changing example of the application of this algorithm is given by Google. This is exactly the algorithm. This is the PageRank algorithm that Google's using. Google, the PageRank algorithm that they use to read your mind and figure out what it is that you're looking for when you type a search into the web is they simply go in and they say, they need to know how, they not only want to give you the websites that match the topics you're talking about, but they want to give you the important ones. And so they have this thing. They say, well, the important websites are those that are linked to by important websites. And so what Google does is it gets the entire network of every link in the entire World Wide Web, billions of links among billions of sites, and then they compute these importance scores. And much of the sort of technological marvel there are the mechanisms to do these big computations. But it turns out to be an extremely powerful thing to do. We just do the same thing applied to journals. So, it's saying so we say important journals are cited by important journals, and we do the same kind of a calculation, same kind of a recursive, if you will, calculation, where we're taking into account the structure of the whole network. We're not just counting up how many times I get cited, but who cited me, and how important were they, and what's their citation behavior like, and why do I think they're important? Well, it's because of who cited them, and on out. And so as a result, we end up with this measure that deals with a lot of the problems. Citations from good journals are worth more under Eigenfactor, right? A citation from Nature is actually sort of valued appropriately, and it's worth a lot more than the citation from a third-tier review. Citations from non-review journals are worth more because citations from journals that cite large numbers of papers on average are effectively devalued accordingly. And comparably, citations from frugal fields are worth more. So a field like mathematics that might cite 12 or 15 papers on average will tend to have very, very low impact factor scores when they compete with a field like molecular biology, where we practice what's we call defensive citation. And so the idea is that you cite anybody who might possibly review your paper in triplicate, and then if they reject it, they'll lose 3 citations. It sounds like a joke, but I mean the biologists in the room aren't laughing. It's okay. So yeah, I don't know if that's really so anyway, that's it's sort of accounting for these things, and just one way to kind of think about what it is that Eigenfactor is doing, instead of thinking about it in this sense of like important people having important friends, important journals being linked to by important journals, there's a dual model that we could use to think about this. Think of Eigenfactor as a model of citation-driven research. The idea being we envision a researcher that goes to the library, and that researcher goes and gets a random journal off the shelf, opens up that journal, and goes to a random citation in that journal, and follows that citation to another journal, and opens up that journal, picks a random citation, follows that citation to another journal, and then continues this process over and over again. Turns out, and you imagine a researcher doing this, or you could imagine taking 1,000 monkeys to the library and letting the 1,000 monkeys do that, though you might not like that. I think it's fun. So you get 1,000 monkeys, and then you want to know, over time, where do the monkeys spend their time as they go running around the journal doing this, running around the library doing this procedure? Turns out that the Eigenfactor score, or the PageRank score, or the Eigenvector centrality, tells you what fraction of the time these monkeys or researchers or whatever it is would be spending with each particular journal. So what we do, we take the data from Thomson's Journal Citation Reports, and so we've got, you know, approximately 7,000 journals over 14 years, giving us maybe 60 million citations. And Eigenfactor then gives us a measure of the total value that, you know, of a journal in the sense of what fraction of the time do researchers that are following citation trails spend, you know, in our model with that particular journal. So looking at some of the, you know, top journals, top top journals by Eigenfactor, we see the sort of ones we suspect. We've got Nature, Science, Journal of Biological Chemistry. You might ask, why is that so high? Well, it's really enormous. It's vastly bigger than most others. It's very good, yeah, but it's really thick. It's what, 6,000 articles a year or something, right? And so, you know, so for this journal, it's a measure basically how much would I pay to have this thing, right? It says, well, if there's people in my library, 2% of the time, if they're following citation chains, they're looking for Nature. And 1% of the time, if they're following citation chains, they're looking for the Journal of the American Chemical Society, and so on. So it's a model of usage based on, you know, based on citation patterns. We can do the same thing with raw usage data as well. So that's one. We do this. People then say, well, how do these compare with impact factors? And, you know, people want measures of prestige where, rather than measures of kind of total. This is useful if you're trying to figure out how much to pay for it. But people want to know, well, what are the top dogs? And so we propose this measure of article influence that sort of tells us about the prestige of different journals. Article influence is essentially a weighted form of it's the eigenfactor divided by the numbers of articles published. This makes it comparable to impact factor. And so you know, here are the top non-review journals in terms of, for last year, in terms of article influence: Science, Nature, Cell, New England Journal, Nature Immunology. Anyone who knows their impact factors well will be really surprised to see this one popping up here. You know where the top, anyone know where the top economics journal is by impact factor? What do you think? It's not in the top 100. It's not in the top 100 because there are cultural differences between the fields and citation patterns and so on that impact factor blows, and this corrects for. So you could do this. We can look at things like, you know, very much of my interest. Here's the website. Here I am looking at the cost effectiveness. Now I'm taking the eigenfactor. It's, you know, what's the chance somebody wants my, you know, what fraction of the time is somebody following citation chains looking for my journal? Now I say, now I'll look at the price per eigenfactor. So the idea is I want to buy journals that people are likely to look at, but they're cheap, right? So I rank my journals by price per eigenfactor. And, you know, other than the open access stuff, Science is the best deal, and JAMA is the next best deal, and actually the Journal of Biological Chemistry is a great deal, and Circulation and Journal of Immunology and so on down the list. So we can you know, look at that to actually look at what kind of deal we're getting in terms of price. It's also a lot of fun. We can kind of look at how prestige and size change over time. I'll just show you one little picture here about the rise of Nature. Let's see. I don't want that. I want the one behind it. About the rise of Nature Publishing Group. So what this shows here on this axis, on the y-axis is article influence. This is the prestige of the journals. On the x-axis is the size. So here we've got small, no good journals, large, no good journals, large, good journals, small, good journals. And what we see in yellow are journals that are branded Nature. So there's Nature, there's Nature Genetics. This is in 1997. There's Nature Medicine. In blue, we see the Cell Press journals: Cell, Neuron, Immunity, Current Biology, et cetera. And in green, just for fun, we see all the journals that are owned by Nature Publishing Group, but that they don't brand as Nature. So what's the value of a name? So now let's watch. This is an enormous change in the high end. The area is the eigenfactor, so it's the total value, if you will, our estimate of the total value. So let's just watch this as a movie. So we see these various ones changing, cells coming down a little bit. Nature starts to launch all these new entries here. This is really amazing. Nature just fires all of these rockets up in here, and you know, we have all of these new things that have come up in the last 10 years, and Nature's completely taken over from Cell Publishing the high end of the, the high prestige end of the biology market. So you just, you can kind of see these patterns, and you can see things like the journals that Nature. You can see a bunch of, all kinds of fun things that happen here. There are all these new green ones that arise too. Things, I mean, Nature owns them, but they just don't call them Nature, and they all come in, but none of them shoot to the sky. They stay right down with the other green ones. It's all about the name, right? So yeah, these are just the sort of things you can play with. Let's see, that's not what I meant to do. I wanted to try to return to this. And we're back at the start. That's definitely not where I meant to be. JQ, how are we doing on time? I know we may have gotten started a minute later than we expected.
We have about 20 minutes.
Oh, there's more time than I'll know what to do with. All right. Okay, so talked a bit about pricing, talked a bit about ranking. You can look up all these things. These are all available on our website, eigenfactor.org. And so we have, for many years, we've got the various scores for all those 7,000 journals listed by Thomson. Thomson's recently got excited about this, and so actually Thomson's now licensing these trademarks from us, and they're reporting these scores in the journal citation reports as well, next to the impact factor, which is good news for us, because it gives us a degree of legitimacy, and it means that their lawyers leave us alone. I shouldn't have said that on tape. But it's true. So what I want to talk about now is so this is the data that they're giving us generously, and what I want to talk now is sort of about how we have been using that to try to understand the structure of science, because that's just something that I find fascinating. I like to do a lot of interdisciplinary research, and I like to know, what's the big picture of science. So we study networks a lot in my lab as a basic research topic in biology, in physics, and now in studying scholarly communication. Networks are really ways of envisioning the flow of information, and scholarship is all about the flow of ideas. So these are a natural match. Networks are wonderful ways to take big complicated structures and put them into pictures that we can quickly and easily parse and understand and pull the stories out. So here's a beautiful example. This is a high school dating network, right? And you can just see the stories in this already. There's drama in this cluster, right? And I'm over here, I'm right there, and they're marvelous ways to sort of envision pattern in data and understand what's going on. So great. So how does it scale up to big data sets like the ones I'm talking about? Well, that's how it scales up. Somebody actually published that for reasons I don't understand. But this is a very small subset of our network, drawn as a network, and it's a disaster. We can't make any sense of that. So the problem is essentially, I like to think the problem, it's as if you've got all of this data, and it's not the right data for the job. I mean, you've flown into Boston. Your friend says, come see me at Harvard. Here's a map, and there's Logan and there's Harvard. You got to have a little bit of inside information to even know that, but this certainly doesn't help. This is the wrong map. You're back there. What you really want is that map. There's the map you want. It says, get on the subway at airport and take it to Government Center, and take the green line to Park Street, and then take the red line out to Harvard, and that's what you want. And a good map comes in, and it takes a big mess of data, and it simplifies down to the important parts, and it highlights the relevant structures. And so what we've done, and I really want to not go into a lot of detail about this, but we're using ideas from network theory and physics and from information theory to figure out how to get algorithms that do this process, right? So the idea is that maps they simplify and highlight things. They're useful compressions. They're tools that compress large amounts of data. And so we've come up with mathematical algorithms for doing that. Talked a little bit about that this morning. I'm not going to talk about it at all now. I'll just show you what it can do. Take these kinds of information theoretic tools for doing this and use this to map citations, for example. So we can take we can take those 60 million citations and use them to map the structure of science, not by how people self-identify, but rather by what they do in their actual citation behavior. And so here's the sort of picture we'd get of the structure of sciences. There's kind of a main backbone where we've got general physics, chemistry, molecular biology, general medicine, ecology and evolution. Out here we've got the social sciences over here, math and engineering up in the top there, and so on. We can zoom in and look at the sort of relationships that pop out. Here around physics, we've got some applied fields like power systems that are heavily citing physics. They're heavily drawing on ideas from physics, but we don't, this is a one-way arrow. We don't have a reciprocal relation there. Because, of course, physics, general physics, basic science physics isn't being driven by the applied developments in power systems, even though the converse is true. Each of these fields, the boundaries of the fields are not determined by, or their membership's not determined by my preconceptions of what are the fields of science. Rather, we're just giving it this big network of journals, and it's saying, okay, given the citation patterns you're seeing, science is best described as these 80 fields that are related in the ways that we see here, and they kind of run off a list of the members of each journal and so on. We can zoom in, do kind of finer grained models. Here's the social sciences. So as we look just at the social sciences, we see some additional divisions come into focus, just like when you move from a state map to a city map, you see a lot of new stuff. Just like in my department, or any other, Stanford, anthropology splits into cultural and physical, and sociology breaks into institutional and behavioral, and so on. So we can kind of see that sort of stuff. I won't show you this, just to save some time, I won't show you this on the website. This is kind of fun to play with. It's an interactive browser that lets you get in there and look kind of a field at a time at each of the at each of the different fields. What are its connections? You can change the levels of resolution, look at the top journals, click see information about those journals, and so on. So this, partly it's just kind of fun to make these maps and think about it, but it also can be really useful to understand things. The one thing that these maps do for us is that they help us see patterns. So, for example, we've written a paper recently about how impact factors vary across, how and why impact factors vary over time and across fields. And so here's instead of a table of the average impact factor of 80 fields, here's a map of impact factor according to what field it's in. And so, by putting this on a map, we can kind of see the patterns right away. As well, impact factor really isn't kind to the social sciences, and actually doesn't, nor engineering and computer science. Do very, very well down here in medicine and in molecular and cell biology. Okay, in ecology, evolution, and physics, and so on. What's even more useful than seeing what the patterns are at a glance is being able to at least generate hypotheses about where those patterns, what might be driving those patterns. I mean, you might say, yeah, well, of course, these are the cool fields. Of course they've got, but there might be better explanations. This is essentially, you can think of this as the coverage in Thomson's data set of these particular fields. How thorough is the coverage of economics? How thorough is the coverage of computer science by Thomson? So here's a map of that, and you see a certain pattern there. And here's a map of impact factor. Boy, really looks similar. And so that generates a hypothesis that these differences are driven by differences in coverage. And, indeed, so we wrote a paper and worked out. And you can say, yeah, in fact, that is where most of the variation comes from, and so on. It just helps you see these patterns. The maps give you these sort of 30,000-foot views of science that help you understand what you're doing as a researcher or what a publisher is doing. So this is something we made for JSTOR, showing them where are their holdings. So JSTOR is very strong over here in these in areas of the social science. They're very strong in ecology and evolution. And now they can think about where is it that you want to expand? Do you want to expand in these regions? Do you want to try to strike up a foothold up in mathematics? Where are you headed? And then, one of the things that I think is absolutely the most important about these kinds of maps is that they help us organize data. So unorganized, the citation data are a mess. Here's unorganized citation data. These are the top 400 journals in science. The sort of the size of each bar is a journal here. Its size is its eigenfactor. Here they're just arrayed alphabetically, and we show the links among these top journals with the lines. This is an absolute mess. It's no better than the picture I already showed you. You can't understand anything from this at all. But if we go through and we build a map by finding, you know, the clusters of journals that are related to one another, and we use that as a structure for organizing these same data, we start to get much prettier pictures. So now I'm putting journals that are in the same field together here, and I'm putting fields that are closely related together along the outer line. And I'm already starting to see some semblance of pattern there. As I move on and, you know, use better algorithms for demonstrating the large bundles of flow, I get something like this, and I can zoom in and you know, ultimately show show the patterns of flow between any individual journal. Here's the Lancet as it spreads out to various areas of clinical medicine, various areas of molecular biology, ecology, evolution, et cetera. Zoom in and see these sorts of things. And I'll just show you for 1 second the application that drives this. This is kind of fun to. So here's the application online, and so you can see, you know, here are the different fields: neuroscience, ecology, evolution, parasitology, psychiatry, et cetera. We can go in and say, okay, let's look at psychiatry. Where do its citations go? And see, okay, no, what's this? This is analytical chemistry. So there's citation relation there. Let's see what analytical chemistry is doing. There's what, this is a citation flow out of analytical chemistry, quite heavy in chemistry, you know, quite heavy into a lot of the biomedical sciences. Really ignoring this whole region. What is it? Oh, that's economics. What's economics doing? This is what economics is doing, and so on. So, I mean, these are just the sorts of ways that we can use these kinds of maps to be something more than simply kind of a fun diversion. They can be a very useful way to organize data that we really want to be able to analyze and process. So with that, all I really need to do is thank the whole number of people that have been involved. Jevin West is the head developer of Eigenfactor. If I get in any trouble, it's Ted Bergstrom's fault. And these other people have all been involved at various stages. So thank you all for your attention and time. Yeah.
What do you think the role of professional societies is steering its members towards publishing at the lower cost?
It's probably very. So the question: what's the role of professional societies in terms of steering its members toward publishing in lower cost journals? There's a little bit of reluctance of such societies to do so too aggressively because they feel like they've got a little bit of a conflict of interest problem. They are the lower cost journals. They are where we ought to be publishing if we're trying to keep library costs down. But I think it's actually pretty important. I mean, right now, the general level of knowledge about the price differences, especially among more senior faculty. Actually, my graduate students, I have a pretty good handle on this, but if I didn't work on it, I don't think I'd know much about it. Many of my colleagues don't. And so I think that kind of educational role is probably quite important. At the same time, what these journals would do us very well to do would be to expand a little bit. The fields have expanded enormously. The sizes of our society journals have not expanded comparably. And as a result, that's created a market for people to come in and charge 4 times the price. And so if our society journals were to expand, that would probably be a good thing as well. Yeah? Mm-hmm.
We too use citations, but I would say that some wonderful original work, and I would highly guess that happens in science too, is done without such reliance on citations, especially particularly regional. Is there any provision for that? Even your work seems to be completely citation-driven. Is there any room for somebody who has a new idea, doesn't cite a whole lot of stuff?
Well, there's sort of two directions to go there. So this is all about, here we are judging you based on who cites you, not based on who you cite. So if you have an original idea, you don't cite anybody because it's really original, and then people care, then you're just fine. If no one cares, or no one cites you, in my business, it means no one cares. I don't know as well about other places. I mean, obviously the structure of citation is quite different in the humanities. In general, we've simply not, we don't attempt to cover the humanities with what we're doing. The reason is because the meaning of a citation is so different, and the meaning of a publication is so different. And the lifetime is so different, and so as a result, Thomson in particular has shied away from any kind of data collecting of this sort, collecting, ranking humanities journals, ranking publications, anything like that, because they, their line would be they don't feel it's applicable. What they mean is we think people in the humanities would get too upset if we tried to do it. Otherwise, we'd do it. The very fact that people would get upset that it is not appropriate use of those sorts of data suggests to me that it probably is not appropriate use of those sorts of data. And we need to find more intelligent ways to think about how it is, what are the appropriate indicators of credit? How do I reference your ideas? And what is it's a PageRank, it's a recommendation system, right? It says every web page recommends other web pages when it links to them. And so is this, right? This is a recommendation system. This journal recommends other journals when it links to them. How do you recommend things? And what are the things that you recommend? And it may just be a very, very different answer there. One that we want to get into. About 5 minutes before the talk, I got an email from someone in our library asking me almost exactly your question and asking how this could help. And I don't know yet. But it would be really cool to figure out ways to do useful things there. Yeah.
I just have a really, really minor question.
Uh-huh.
On your map, the first one had sort of orange and yellow
Yes.
circles,
Mm-hmm.
and it seemed like the orange nucleus had a different size.
You're right.
Around some of them.
Yep.
What was the meaning of the different size of that?
So the meaning of the so this is the so the inside are what fraction of the citations in physics go to physics, and these are your citations from physics that go out. And so we can look, at least with respect to the partitions that this map chooses, how insular or non-insular is a field. And so, whoops, I didn't mean to do that. So let's go here. So something like, a little bit hard to see here, but environmental science here has quite a large region around it. Environmental science is citing heavily into geoscience and chemistry and ecology and evolution. And while you can't see this so easily from where you are, I can tell you from knowing the numbers very well that economics is the single most insular discipline, that's just how it is. Yeah.
So as an economist, I have this question.
Sure.
So you start with this sort of coordination problem where people want to be published journals or publishing.
Right.
And that really is what drives the market power of Elsevier and so on,
Mm-hmm.
and what allows them to charge the prices that
Mm-hmm.
So it seems like universities and libraries have some power in that situation.
Mm-hmm.
That they're, in particular, if they could coordinate, they could break that monopoly power and move you to a different equilibrium where people publish in these nonprofit society-driven journals. And at that point, it would be very difficult, possible, for-profit publishers to break this.
I mean, I agree. If you could do that, it's so damn hard getting academics to coordinate or collaborate on anything. I mean, it's.
But that is exactly the problem: is how to get people to coordinate.
Yeah, certainly having the dean or the provost tell you to do it isn't effective. At least not in my experience. And so what would be effective, right? I mean.
And also, how much effort, how much coordination would it actually take? Right. So how stable?
Right.
Is the current equilibrium? And I'm wondering if you have any insights to that question.
Well, that's another big problem, of course, is suppose that here at the University of Oregon, and you could actually generate almost instantly 100% consensus to coordinate on whatever was the appropriate locus. That actually probably isn't enough, because what you need is the entire scholarly community. You don't need the entire community. You need a big enough fraction that it matters to do it. And well, I mean, it happened in my field with PLOS, right? And part of the reason it worked with PLOS was because some extremely big names used their kind of opinion leader power and stepped in really solidly behind this and said, we believe in this and we're going to make it work. And then the kind of next tier of big names were willing to gamble at least a single paper that it would work, and then it took off. So it can be done. We've seen it happen a lot more, at smaller levels, where a number of examples, these in mathematics. We've seen it happen in ecology and evolution, where an editorial board collectively gets ticked off with the price increases and collectively jumps, taking their manuscripts with them, and so that's another easy way to do that coordination.
But then I guess what I'm thinking is currently proposing using your methodology to give libraries guidance on what kinds of journals to get.
Mm-hmm.
But you could also use this to encourage people to try to get out of this bad equilibrium and providing information on which are the easiest cases to try to.
Indeed, would be very, very useful. I'm a little embarrassed. I should have, since I think about these things all the time. I should have thought of this as a size of domains of attraction problem, and looked for the current bad equilibria with the smallest domains of attraction. But that had never occurred to me. So I appreciate the suggestion. I have to think about why it's hard, but instead of making something up, I'll just say it's a great idea, and I like it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right, and yeah, I think so. There've been a number of efforts at doing that, and basically, as you'd expect, if you think about these coordination problems, if you have small, tight communities, they're solvable, and if you have large, loose communities, they're really bloody hard, and that's what we're looking at essentially. PLOS, I think, managed to leverage a new distribution technology to make a shift that they could not have necessarily made as a regular entrant into the market. So because there was a shakeup, they were able to say, okay, look, we're coming in as this new alternative, and that certainly added to their momentum, and that's part of why a big diffuse community like all of the biological sciences could be driven to adopt PLOS biology as almost the equal of nature and science. But yeah. You mean the kind of mandatory deposit requirements?
Yeah, that's who can force people to coordinate.
Right. Well, okay, yeah, so the question is, how's PubMed Central going to shift things? People are now required by NIH, if they're NIH funded, to deposit their papers in PubMed Central within some particular time of submission to the journal. Compliance rates are so low that I'm not very optimistic. I don't see that changing quickly. Basically, the compliance rates have to get high, and the blackout times that they'll put up with have to get short. Is it 6 months now, right? I think it's 6 months, and in immunology, molecular biology, that doesn't cut it. My library needs it now, or else I can't compete for the next research grant. And so it's great, it's wonderful for a lot of reasons, but I don't see it as being the instigator of a big shakeup in the way that all of this operates.
But if the NIH said, okay, we're going to do away with 6 months and make it 0 immediate, then
If they made it 0 immediate and they had someone working at getting the papers out of they put someone to work taking the papers and appropriating them under eminent domain into their things for us, maybe. I've yet to see any indication that we as a community are serious about complying with those sorts of requirements, even once they're made requirements. And with high-profile people, virtually everyone not complying, I haven't seen any indication that NIH has the spine to turn around and penalize somebody for not complying. I may be being too cynical here, but it's just a prediction. It's worth exactly what my opinions on politics are worth. It's not the result of serious analysis. Okay.
Just a comment on how difficult this coordination problem may be to solve.
Right.
in the archive ahead of time, well
Yeah.
before it's published. And that's the main method of dissemination of information.
Right.
So nobody relies on journals.
Right.
Maybe only for old papers.
Mhm.
Nevertheless, it seems like the expensive publishers are still doing okay. They're still
Yeah, so this is very interesting. We were talking about this at dinner last night. So in physics, everybody deposits their paper in the archive, preprint repository. It's far more important to publish there than in the journals, basically, in terms of who sees it. I've just recently, last couple of years ago, started writing my first papers in theoretical physics and was just blown away by the fact that we'd put these things in the archive and like everybody in the biz would email us within a week and they'd read the papers. And it was just like, my God, I mean, in biology, we wait 4 years to publish it and then no one reads it. Yeah, and it was wonderful. It's a great way to communicate. But yes, you're right. It hasn't really hurt the for-profit publishers. You go back to the numbers, in physics, the for-profit publishers are still charging as much money. They're still charging 4 times as much. Why is that? It's because until now, the price elasticity of demand has been effectively zero. Our mission as librarians has been to make sure that, if we're at a reasonable library, everything is available without paying to the faculty in case they might someday want it. And so long as that's our goal, if you were Elsevier, wouldn't you charge 4 times as much for it? I mean, why not 6, actually? Yeah, I think it's only once we realize that we are on. If I was, and some of it may be because, and I don't know here, but it may be because structurally the budget decisions get made field by field by field. So, I mean, maybe it would be a reasonable decision to say, sorry, physics, you guys have been so good at communicating that you lose half your library budget. We're going to use it. We're going to give it to the biologists who won't share preprints because they're jerks. And I mean, that actually might be a very expedient solution.
Yeah. I think up till now there's not really been a sensitivity in the physics community that by publishing Elsevier we're kind of hurting ourselves.
Exactly.
It's only now starting to grow.
That's right.
And but what I fear is Elsevier will start bribing authors and referees.
Of course they will.
So if you think about it, if the burden of my publishing in Elsevier is shared across my whole community, and I only bear 1/n of that, they'll
Right.
bribe me 1/n to keep me.
Yeah. It's a step in the right direction. At least we'll be getting 1/n back into our pockets. But no, I think that's right. At some point we will want to. I'm surprised that they're not paying more. I would have predicted that by now referees would be better paid, and that actually at the high end we'd have some bidding for authors as well. And I'm a bit surprised that hasn't happened yet. We should probably do some thinking, and I really haven't done this about how we deal with it when it comes, because it will come. Right. Even more so, yeah.
So until that kind of form of digital intelligence is actually recognized,
Mm-hmm.
I think we're kind of slay to be a public point of the realm, no matter how much.
Yeah, we were talking about this morning. I mean, I think we've made more progress than gets suggested by that argument. So the argument that we heard is that, well, as long as our tenure decision is based on our publication in peer-reviewed print journals, we're stuck. Of course, there are a couple of different hurdles. What I was arguing, and I may just be wrong for other fields. In my field, there's a few hurdles I have to get over in order to get tenure at the University of Washington. One is that I need 3 papers a year in one of these journals. Another is that they're going to write for 7 or 8 outside letters, and those outside letters, if those outside letters come back and say, what do you think of Bergstrom? And they say, well, I never heard of the guy until you sent me the request for the outside letters. I'm dead. And so it's actually, I think for a lot of people, it's easier to get the challenging bar is not getting the 3 papers a year in some Elsevier journal. The challenging bar is making sure that the people that get written to for the outside letters know who you are, and there it's strongly in your interest to invest in disseminating your work as broadly as possible. So. It may be. Oh, so your community is small enough that this isn't such a problem?
Well, sure. I mean,
Okay.
So you were surprised the number of email responses you got.
Right.
So the archive system includes this
anyway. I mean, certainly I completely agree that it would be, we're not going to get rid of Elsevier if you got to have 14 Elsevier papers to get tenure. That's a serious problem, and we need to think about what to do there. But I do think at least I think there are more incentives in place, and people are responding reasonably well to them for other kinds of traditional publication. Yeah. Okay.
It's not as simplistic as thinking just that anything to be published in peer-reviewed journals. That's the current instantiation of the idea that there is peer review of work to establish whether it has, I'll describe it as merit, where the result of the merit was the publication. So what would be the archive equivalent of that? Is it merely the frequency with which random individuals who access the database look at it? Well, that's not the way we make decisions about publication. That's decided by an editorial board that has been established, sometimes in some ways and others. But in the best locations, like in the best journal in my field, the editorial board is made up of folks that in that field we believe are among the best minds thinking about what's going on. So for digital publication, the issue for PMP is not that the form in which it occurs, it's in whether or not there's any serious peer review of the material in order to understand it, followed later by an evaluation of an independent body of whether or not the peer review decisions were the right ones. So if we solve that problem, and we could do that readily on this campus, because there's no one who will be opposed to that idea if we thought it through. And in that regard, we have a way to sort of take advantage of that archiving structure if we could figure out how to distinguish frequency of access from a qualitative, we read the stuff and evaluated it as meaningful. So if we figure that out, then that one pinch point can be addressed.
Yeah, I think it'd be great. I mean, we're spending a lot of time working on these kinds of things. How can we come up with more intelligent metrics of at the individual paper level of the influence of papers, and they may well involve integrating citation information with usage information with semantic processing. And so we've got a three-way collaboration going, working on those kinds of things. I don't know what the solution, it's a very hard problem. I don't know what the solutions will be.
Still, that your stuff is still grounded in frequency, and frequency and importance are not the same thing.
Right. Well, I guess, I mean, I think far and away the best thing to do is just have somebody that you trust who understands it, read it, and tell you what they think. I mean, it's, for that question, that's not hard. It's, it's, at the university, it's so many places. You got to get 3 R01s for tenure or something, and this baffles me why any university would trust a bunch of anonymous reviewers to make decisions about somebody that they know so well. Why? But that holds a lot more weight. And read the work, think about it, evaluate it, and yeah, it's going to make the promotion and tenure process perhaps a little bit more work. Maybe that's what we have to face up to. Great, thanks.